The Lord be with you. Well, a lot of time has passed since we first started making these videos. And all the way back when Safer at Home here in Wisconsin first started, which was late March, I felt like once we accepted the fact of the disruption and the upheaval, and we could sort of sit and listen and pay attention to what God was doing both in us and in the world, I feel like there were some good lessons that we started to learn. I think a lot of this, and in a lot of ways, this is sort of a follow-up video to one that was shot during quarantine, which was what is important, what is necessary. And in that video, I started asking questions about what normal is and what we need to learn in these moments and kind of what God is doing and how we can embrace that without fully knowing what that was going to look like. And as I said, I feel like there were some good things. We were telling good stories to one another. We were forming some good memories. I know not everyone's situation was great all of the time. I'm not trying to make light of that. But I do think when we got down to sort of the core of the situation, there were just some good reminders, some good lessons in there from the Lord. And my hope was that these would be things that would be permanently implanted in us, things that we would carry forward. Now that things have shifted, Safer at Home lifted for us in May. People kind of started returning slowly to work. Furloughs were ending. The kids' online school wrapped up in early June, and summer sort of officially started. That was when I started to notice that things were sort of returning back to the way they were. Again, not in the sense that everything is normal again. That's a word that we use and overuse a lot. People have been hanging on to this idea that they would get back to normal. And as I said long ago, I'm not entirely sure what normal is going to be or what we're going to get back to. It certainly isn't going to be the same thing. One of the things, though, that I have noticed, even personally, is busyness for a lot of people has increased. I'm finding myself just as busy as I was before quarantine, before COVID-19 had kind of shut things down. And with busyness comes a lot of distraction, comes a lot of forgetting of some of those important things that I think we were learning. And that's the question, I think, now. In a lot of ways, this is a companion to what is important, what is necessary, that video from several videos ago. If we were just learning back then kind of new ways to think about things, now maybe let's re-examine how many of those things we have retained, how many of those things have actually been imprinted in our lives. Because I'm afraid we're forgetting. I'm afraid we're moving out of a posture of learning and to just a posture of doing and trying to do things the way we used to do them. Now there's an interesting verse in Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, verse 10, which actually says, the author says, do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. Interestingly, Ecclesiastes is a book all about wisdom, and it takes a lot to get wisdom. It isn't something that's just granted to you instantaneously. You need to work at it. You need to chew on it. You need to keep applying and reapplying wisdom to different situations, different contexts, so that you can understand more. And it's interesting, when we start asking why were the former days better, we undercut wisdom. We try sometimes to over remember the past, to focus on the past, keep talking about the past, keep trying to recreate the past, to the point that sometimes we stop living in the present. And that's what I want to do. I want to ask us about our present so that we can see how much of our past, our recent past, we are successfully bringing forward. So there's about 4 or 5 things I just want to recall, lessons that I think we had learned, lessons that I hope we're learning, lessons that I hope we retain, even though a lot of us are filling our days and getting busy again. And lest we forget these things and fall back into our old habits, which weren't necessarily helpful. The first thing I want to remember is simplicity. When the pandemic forced us to stop doing things, even though it drove us crazy for a while, I think one of the things some of us learned was there is a beauty to simplicity, a simple life. A simple life is uncluttered. A simple life can be focused. A simple life can notice things, do things, breathe, move in ways that a busy, weighted down life just can't succeed in. So may we not forget to try and keep and retain some level of simplicity to our lifestyle. Secondly, may we continue to remember that relationships and family are very important. You know, I think for a lot of us, we reconnected. We remembered people who we hadn't talked to in ages, and we reached out, called them, emailed them, heard from them, spoke with them, did Zoom meetings with them, whatever it was. We reconnected with people in good and healthy ways. And even in our own homes, yeah, we got on each other's nerves, and a lot of times we wish we weren't as present with people all the time as we were forced to be for a couple of months there. But I think for a lot of us, in a lot of ways, it reminded us how important the people that we live with are, how important family is. We had kind of lost touch with each other. And these were good things. These are things that we can't afford to forget. Thirdly, I think that we need to continue to remember that creation needs rest. We saw this when there was less traffic in busy, congested cities. We saw this when there was less air travel. We saw as there were less people sort of making a huge carbon footprint in a lot of ways, and people had gone back to the simpler lifestyle. Creation sort of had some good healing moments. I think we appreciated creation a little bit more because at least here in North America, we were experiencing quarantine right towards the end of winter and the beginning of spring. So as we could go outdoors, as we could see things budding and birds beginning to sing and make nests, it just reminded us, man, there is a lot of creativity, a lot of beauty in the world around us. And we need to take the time to appreciate that more. Fourthly, we need to continue to remember that we still need space for prayer and communion with God. When you can't do anything else, especially gather with people in the way that you were used to gathering, prayer becomes just a lifeline. That's our connection to God. I think a lot of us remembered that. A lot of us had time now that we could pray, even creating moments of silence where we could just sit and listen and have God sort of wash over us and remind us of gospel truths and hear words of blessing and promise and even rebuke These were things that we couldn't hear before, and we need to continue to remember. We can't afford to forget that we need to keep prioritizing prayer and space for communion with God as a regular part of our lives. And then finally, fifthly, we can't forget to just be helpful wherever we're at. I think after we got past the initial fear of the coronavirus and trying to protect ourselves, and then once we were sort of stuck at home, then all of a sudden you start to begin to think about people who are in situations worse than you. You tend to think, if I can go shopping, if I'm comfortable going shopping, but I know my neighbor or my parent or grandparent is not comfortable going and maybe shouldn't be going, well, then I can give them a call and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to the store. Can I pick some things up for you? These were very simple things. Driving by somebody's house, knocking on their window and saying hi from behind glass, just so they could see a real human face that wasn't on the other side of a computer screen. Just ways to be compassionate, ways to be helpful, ways to encourage other people. These were good lessons we learned, and I think we can't afford to forget them as we continue to move back into older rhythms, busier rhythms of life. My concern is if we forget these things, if we stop carrying these lessons forward and stop implementing them as a regular part of our days and lives, we will find ourselves out of touch very quickly and very easily with God again. And I just want to close our time with a sobering reminder of that very thing. These come from the prophet Amos as he speaks to his people in his day, the words that God was telling him to tell to the people. This is chapter 4, verses 6 through 9. He says, I gave you empty stomachs in every city and lack of bread in every town. Yet you have not returned to me, declares the Lord. I also withheld rain from you when the harvest was still 3 months away. I sent rain on one town, but withheld it from another. One field had rain, another had none and dried up. People staggered from town to town for water, but did not get enough to drink. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. Many times I struck your gardens and vineyards, destroying them with blight and mildew. Locusts devoured your fig and olive trees, yet you have not returned to me, declares the Lord. Lest we forget and let the things that the Lord has brought into our lives and into our society as reminders to return to Him, lest we forget them and go back to the old ways, I think we may find ourselves even further from God than we were before the pandemic started. So, beloved, continue in the lessons that you have learned. Keep posturing yourselves in a way that you can receive from the Holy Spirit, and keep these new lessons, these new rhythms, these new ways of life as important things that you can do, that we can do together, because God has taught them to us once, and He is trying to call us back to Himself. And I pray that that's a lesson that we retain and continue to learn. So in these days of ongoing pandemic, may the peace of God be with you. Amen.